med device company that had an instrument, but also consumables, reagents. And where they make their money is on the consumables, probably not that surprising. And so they were really looking at the duty and taxes that were being paid as a result of the value of these consumables. They didn't want to absorb the duty and tax, the VAT taxes, when they were shipping. So they began by using an Incoterm, a DDU, which is delivery duty unpaid. The reverse is DDP. If you ship at DDP, the duties and taxes are coming back to your office. The shipper, if it's DDU, it's getting absorbed or billed back to the recipient. So they decided to use this DDU so that they were not seeing these VAT duty and taxes hit their books. The problem with this was that customs doesn't release a shipment until they know that they're going to get paid. So if the recipient wasn't planning on paying the duty and taxes, maybe the recipient isn't on file, customs waits, holds on to the shipment, waiting to get the duties and taxes before they release it. Customs will reach out to the recipient to try to get those paid. Oftentimes, it goes back to the contact information. If you're shipping or selling to a doctor, they're not getting back to customs. So we see in the, FedEx or UPS, what's called an exception, which is there's an issue with delivery. And then you go to investigate that and find out what that is. Sending a DDU could possibly be the answer in some of those situations. So customs was reaching out to the receiving party. It would be the wrong person. It would sit there in customs. So they thought this was the only option. So another option could be that rather than sending it DDU, you ship it DDP. Now, the duties and taxes are going to come back, but you can take those charges. You can probably calculate what they're going to be as you move forward, or once they come back, the actual numbers, and invoice your client back at that point. In this case, this client did not have an office in the countries they were shipping to. If you do have an office, then the duties and taxes can get billed to that office. In this case, that was not the case. So what they could do, and what they eventually did, is set up an importer of record. And what that did is it allowed them to realize the duty and taxes without setting up an office and without it avoiding the DDU and therefore getting stuck in customs. So that ended up being a very good solution, is having an IOR, an importer of record. The other items, so when it comes to paperwork that you can find yourself being challenged with, is harmonized tariff codes, the HTS numbers, deciding what those should be, and deciding what those should be not only at the very beginning stages where you have that initial category, but HTS numbers are broken down, and the very end number is often a 0 or a 1. When you get down to that very end number, the difference between the 0 and 1 in some cases can be a different duty and tax calculation. So your duties and taxes are based on your HTS number. It's important to make sure you have the right one. And if you are off by 1, you can find customs coming back to you. We've seen this happen, and saying, wait a second, it shouldn't have been 01, it should have been 00. And next thing you know, you owe more money in duties and taxes than you originally thought. So that's really important. Getting a POD and delivery in the end to make sure that it's final delivered, so that you can get that duty and tax rate. You can come up and make sure you're invoiced at time of receipt if you want to get that invoice out really quickly. And then the other paperwork you have to keep track of course, is the commercial invoice. For instance, not only on the commercial invoice do you want to put your description, but you also want to put what it's used for. Sometimes customs sees a description and they don't know exactly what that means if it's not in layman's terms. So they might hold it just to dig a little bit or contact you. So we always suggest to explain what it's used for. An electronic filing, an EEI, is used for anything with a value of 2,500 or more. So if you need help with that or you don't know about filing, you should go back to your freight carrier and talk to them about that, but it is required for anything 2,500 or more. And last is trade shows and carnets. So you might be shipping internationally, selling equipment, you might be demoing it, or you might be going to trade shows. If you are demoing it or going to a show, you can set up a carnet. A carnet allows for a temporary import. So what happens is it's not fully imported into the country, and therefore you avoid some of the duties and taxes. There are criteria that needs to be met. In other words, one of the criteria is you need to get the shipment back into the U.S. prior to a certain time span. It's usually about a year. It can vary. So you need to understand what the carnet rules are for that particular country. Carnets can also be used for demos because, again, it's usually there for some short period of time. So if it's not being fully imported into the country, for instance, it's not a sale, then carnets are a great solution for shipments that are going overseas temporarily.
And I don't know how this happened, but I somehow became an international shipping geek. I actually find it fascinating. It's super complicated. The rules and regulations change depending on what country you're shipping to, the requirements. So if you're planning on shipping internationally, you should probably consult with your shipping partner. If you are shipping internationally and you're experiencing some issues, you can consult with your shipping partner and they should be able to help you out.
Yeah, one thing to add, we're going to talk about specialty cold chain shipping and shipping items that have to remain cold or frozen. But in terms of the DDU, DDP, it's really important that if you're shipping something that needs to remain at a certain temperature, we'd highly recommend that you ship it DDP, where you pay the duties and taxes, and then you just bill back the recipient. So many times we see shipments get stuck at customs because customs is unable to reach the recipient, and customs isn't going to release something unless they're sure they're going to get paid.